Destroyer leader was the United States Navy designation for large destroyers from the 9th of February 1951 through the early years of the Cold War. United States ships with hull classification symbol DL were officially frigates from the 1st of January 1955 until 1975. The smaller destroyer leaders were reclassified as destroyers and the larger as cruisers by the United States Navy. 1975 ship reclassification, so destroyer escorts could be reclassified as frigates in conformance with international usage of the term. Background: by the end of World War I, the destroyers intended to screen formations of battleships had evolved to a displacement of approximately 1,100 tons armed with 4 4-inch guns and 6 or more torpedoes. Italy had built 3 Mirabello-class esploratori approximately 70% larger than contemporary destroyers. The Washington Naval Treaty encouraged United Kingdom satisfaction with its traditional fleet of V&W-class destroyers and United States contentment with similar Wicks and Clemson-class destroyers, while the signatories with smaller fleets explored alternative warship configurations between the classical definitions of destroyer and cruiser. Italy launched 3 Leone-class esploratori and France responded with 6 Chacal-class contratorpedo superdestroyers. Japan launched the minimum light cruiser Yubari followed by the Fubuki-class special-type destroyers with endurance to escort the Kido but high mobile force of aircraft carriers over the wide reaches of the Pacific. Germany built similarly enlarged Zerstorer when it commenced naval rearmament, with the exception of the Tribal class and a few flotilla leaders. Most British and American destroyers built between the world wars were smaller than contemporary Axis destroyers, but as the battleships for which the smaller destroyers had been designed as escorts faded into restricted roles in the combat experience of World War II. United States destroyer displacement increased to 2,100 tons, 2,200 tons, and 2,400 tons to support fast carrier task force operations. Description: as the United States Navy thinned its wartime fleet following Second World War hostilities, the smaller destroyers were discarded until only those over 2,000 tons remained in active service. Naval architects had a few years to evaluate captured ships and combat experience before there was any need for more warships. With large inventories of destroyers and cruisers, new surface warship designs explored placing high-efficiency boilers in hulls of intermediate size. The first destroyer leader US Norfolk was authorized in 1948 and laid down in 1949 as an anti-submarine hunter-killer cruiser based on the Atlanta-class anti-aircraft cruiser, themselves originally conceived as destroyer leaders. She was designated DDL-1 while engaged in experimental work with new senses and weapons systems including SQS-23 sonar, Weapon Alpha, RUR-5ASROC in automatic 3-inch 70 Mark Chapter 26 guns. She served entirely in the Atlantic except for a single deployment to the Indian Ocean and cruise around the world in 1968 shortly before she was retired from active service. A sister ship was authorized but not completed after experience with the prototype did not justify repetition of the design. The next design was for an unarmored cruiser of displacement similar to Italian Capitani Romani class cruisers to carry the new 5-inch 54 caliber Mark Chapter 42 gun. Each of the 4 Mitchell-class ships received somewhat different experimental propulsion machinery powered by 1,200 pounds per square inch combustion engineering forced circulation boilers in DL2 and DL3, and Foster Wheeler boilers in DL4 and DL5. DL2 and DL3 had General Electric turbines, while DL4 and DL5 had Westinghouse turbines. All four ships began operations in the Atlantic. DL3 and DL5 were transferred to the Pacific in 1956. DL3 made routine deployments to the Western Pacific for as long as she remained in commission, but DL5 was transferred back to the Atlantic in 1963 after making a few Western Pacific deployments. DL2 and DL4 made routine deployments to the Mediterranean Sea. The ships were built with an SPS-6 air search radar, an SPS-8 height-finding radar, an QHBA scanning sonar, and an SQG-1 attack sonar. During the first refit in the mid-1950s, the AN SQG-1 and AN QHBA were replaced by an SQS-4 sonar, and the secondary open 3-inch 50 caliber guns were replaced by 3-inch 70 Mark Chapter 26 guns. Later refits removed the unsatisfactory 3-inch 70 guns and Weapon Alpha. After experimental flight operations with the Bell Hull 1 and Kaman HTK-1 aboard Mitchell in 1957, helicopter decks and hangars for the Gyrodyne QH-50- were installed where the aft 3-inch guns had been. DL2 and DL3 underwent major overhaul at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard beginning in 1966, including new Foster Wheeler boilers, an SQS-23 sonar, an SPS-37 air search radar, an SPS-48 height-finding radar, and the Tartar guided missile fire control system for RIM-24 Tartar missiles. DL4 and DL5 had earlier received a new 70-foot bow section mounting the AN SQS-26 sonar and spent the remainder of the service lives testing these prototypes until retirement, when the sisters emerged from overhaul at Philadelphia in 1968 for another decade of service as guided missile destroyers. A third class of destroyer leaders was designed after observing the performance of propulsion and weapon systems tested aboard the Mitchell class. The first three ships were ordered with three 5-inch 54 caliber guns shortly after the name change to frigates. The next three were ordered with two 5-inch 54 guns forward and a RIM-2 Terrier missile system aft, marking the transition to guided missile frigates intended to defend aircraft carriers against anti-ship cruise missiles. All 10 ships were completed with a single 5-inch 54 gun forward, an ASROC launcher where the B gun would have been, and the missile system aft, but the class was variously named Kuntz for the first ship to be ordered with a missile system, or Farragut for the lowest numbered ship to be completed in the configuration. ASROC in sonar gave the guided missile frigates an anti-submarine capability that most of the World War II cruiser conversions lacked. All were reclassified as guided missile destroyers in 1975. Comparison of ships with similar missions. Evolution into guided missile cruisers. 2 additional DLG classes and 2 similar nuclear-powered ships were completed by 1975 for a total of 20 additional guided missile frigates. These significantly larger ships were reclassified as guided missile cruisers in 1975. By 1995 the former guided missile frigates were replaced by the Ticonderoga-class cruisers and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers.